So what we're going to do here is talk about the root cause and the absolute sheer pain of root cause. So video one was about red herrings. It was about products. It was about the stuff that is brought to therapy. And the stuff that we bring as human beings, and we skirt around the issues, afraid to touch what's underneath, afraid to really deepen into the real pain, to the real core issue that's underneath. Now, let me give you a few examples. So, where we may, as human beings, where our clients may bring an issue around the boss. I'm going to give you loads of examples, not just the boss this time, but where the client brings the issue around the boss is a bully, the boss is making me feel uncomfortable, and the boss becomes the trigger, or the boss becomes the reason that the client presents. If we dig deep underneath that boss and the root cause, then it's just an example. But possibly for that client, it's the fear of shame coming from an experience of being called out as a child, coming from an experience of being annihilated for getting stuff wrong, coming from an experience of being annihilated in school. So what we're seeing there is obviously the presenting issue, which is the boss, the trigger, the product, which is the boss, and then the underlying issue, the underlying root cause. Another example, anger. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to give you loads of variations where there's a physical trigger and there's something underneath it, and maybe where it's a feeling and not a person, not a place, not a thing. So anger, if someone's presenting with anger and they can't touch that anger, they can't work with that anger, they can't go near that anger, and they're trying to avoid anything that makes them angry. They're trying to move away from anything that makes them angry. They're trying to skip away, avoid it, protect themselves from any feeling of anger. And underneath that, the reason that they don't like anger, the reason they can't touch anger, is because they have a feeling of out of control. They have a feeling of they have a fear of being bad in that anger. They have a fear of what they will do in that anger because of what they've seen, because of maybe what they've seen in the family home, because of maybe how they experienced that themselves. Another example, I'm going to give you 4 examples in total because it's really important. In relationship, this client arrives because is having difficulty with the relationship, and they arrive at your office because there is a difficulty with their current relationship. They're not getting enough love, they're not getting enough attention, they're not getting enough, and they see no affection, and they have this absolute visceral response to having no affection in their relationship. And they spend a long time moving around that idea of no affection, and not getting affection and not getting their needs met in the relationship. And what we work with and what we find eventually is that the root cause of what they're presenting is actually the absolute fear of the loss of love and connection. How that loss of love and connection was felt in childhood, in the separation of mother and child, how it's a developmental trauma, how it's wounded in the psyche, felt in the body tremendously difficultly. So what we're seeing there is a client who presents with one thing but will hold an entirely different perspective underneath that if we can get the client underneath it. Another, which is another example, which is very specific to the product stuff that we did in video 1. What if I'm sick? What if this is a sickness? What if this is an illness? What if this is to somebody who presents with what we would call what we understand as being a hypochondriac, what we call hypochondria. But really, what we're really looking at underneath that is a fear of death for that client, having seen sickness turn into death multiple times in their family system, in their family, this fear of death that's inside them. So they are classic, clear examples of what often clients present through products or symptoms of anxiety, or where triggers come up. And we know that if we play around in the triggers, if we play around in the symptoms, we seldomly actually get to root cause. If we don't get to root cause, we don't get to eliminate the pain that the client's in. If we soothe any of those symptoms, if we soothe any of those products, if we soothe any of those triggers or try to work on them, then the client will just move on to another trigger. because the root cause, as I've explained, isn't dealt with. Now, there's a problem with this, because what's underneath in root cause can be and is often incredibly difficult. So difficult that the client's job is to keep themselves away from it. So painful that the client's job is to not go near them, is to use as many red herrings as they can get and give, because to touch this stuff is excruciating. To touch the belly of the root cause, to even peek in at it, is absolutely mind-blowingly excruciating for our clients, for ourselves as human beings. It's because what comes with root cause in of itself comes with an entire package, a memory package, an emotional package, a full trauma pattern will be attached to that. That is what comes with any of this root cause stuff. Now, root cause is obviously the answer to eliminating anxiety. It's obviously the answer to healing anxiety, but it comes with a lot of special visitors that the body responds to in hypo or hyperarousal. So when we touch root cause, we are opening the memory of that root cause, the trauma pattern that has been experienced through that root cause, the feelings, the thoughts, everything will open up in the human condition once we touch that root cause, once we get close enough to see it. And that is excruciating because it causes then in the body hypo or hyperarousal. So it causes this dorsal shutdown or causes this absolute panic in the client. Then what happens is the way that the body responds to the root cause becomes the ultimate threat. Because if any of you know what it's like to feel hypo or hyperarousal, it is the most excruciating pain ever. I mean, it is life-threatening. Some of these symptoms are body symptoms are life-threatening. The way that our clients' bodies respond to some of this stuff is excruciating. And as a result, what happens is the client will either avoid it, not go near it, or shut down the process completely. What often happens is that the client will see the therapy as the problem. They'll see the work that you're doing as the problem. Because whilst being afraid of getting sick or being afraid of the boss or being afraid of whatever it is or being triggered by that is one thing. Another thing is to be down in root cause of that. That's an entirely different experience. And so what the client will prefer to do is go back to the original state, being triggered. That's easier. And they'll often blame the process. They'll often disengage. They'll often DNA. They'll often pull away because now it's too threatening. Now their body is responding viscerally. They're responding on hypo and hyperarousal. It's excruciating. We must understand, in order to get to root cause, we must understand that we have to calm the body first. The client has to feel that they are in control of these bodily sensations. They're in control of how their hypo or hyperarousal. They're in control of how they feel or how their body responds to the material that they're investigating in therapeutic practice. Let me say that again. They have to feel that they are in control in hyper or hyperarousal, whatever way their nervous system moves. They have to feel that they're in control of that in relation to the material that they're exploring in therapeutic practice. If they don't feel they're in control, they will not investigate the material and they will sit in these, what we call them, products or red herrings or triggers of anxiety, to which you will try and find solutions to, which the client won't find a solution to long term. They won't eliminate the anxiety, and that becomes the bulk of your work because it's excruciating to be in the belly and the body of the work. And so this video really is about understanding why that happens and understanding that there's a solution There's a solution to this excruciating stage, and that is working in the body, working at calming the body, working at creating autonomy over hypo or hyperarousal. Now, that might seem mind blowing, but it can be done. I've seen it thousands of times at this stage. It can be done. And whenever the body is calm, whenever we stop those hyperarousal states, then the client is much more freer to engage in the root cause material. As hard as it is, as traumatic as it is, as difficult as it is, we've calmed the body, we've stabilized the body long enough to be at root cause. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully it helps you understand why maybe some of your clients aren't going there, because that's what this video is about, understanding why it's excruciating. Also, just a small note to say that not everybody understands that this is what's happening. This isn't conscious for most people. They're not conscious that they're staying up in triggers or red herrings or stories because they're trying to keep away from the material. It's a neuroception, for want of a better word, understanding to stay away from this material. And if I could touch it and the body responds, then that's just the signal I need to stay away from it completely. Hopefully this helps you understand.